The story begins with a train speeding along. When the train reaches a lake, the male protagonist at the window, Stephen, begins to wake up. But he is shocked by what he sees. Previously, Stephen was still in the war zone in Afghanistan. In the blink of an eye, he is already here. He feels incredulous about this. Across from him, there is a woman who calls him Sean. And the woman seems to know Stephen very well. Stephen does not know this woman at all. This strange event makes him very alert. At that moment, a woman spills coffee on his shoes. Then a man appears to check the tickets. Stephen, who is confused, does not know what to do. When he does not know what to do, the woman in front of him immediately takes out a ticket from his clothes. Stephen, who is bewildered, says, "You know me, but I don't know who you are. My name is Captain Coulter Stevens. I am an American plane pilot." The woman in front of him does not care about this. She even thinks this is just a joke. When the train stops at the station, Stephen finally has a chance to get off and see the situation. From the mouths of the people around him, he knows that the destination of the train is Chicago. He does not remember at all when he boarded this train. Stephen, who is confused, can only return to the train. The woman next to him does not forget to ask him, "Can you really fly a plane?" Stephen ignores her. Then another strange thing happens. The shadow that appears in the window is not his face. This makes Stephen scared. He runs to the bathroom, but the person in the mirror is not himself. What is really going on? Stephen unconsciously takes out his wallet to see, but his identity information shows that his name is Sean, and his profession is a teacher. The woman next to him is a bit worried about Stephen. She runs to the bathroom door to ask about his condition. At that time, the train enters the city of Chicago. Next to it, there is another train passing by. Suddenly, the whole train explodes violently. Everyone instantly turns to ashes because of the high temperature. The chain explosion triggers a domino effect. The train next to it also explodes. When Stephen wakes up again, he finds himself in a closed room. A female officer, Goodwin, is talking to him through video. Stephen immediately asks what is really going on. Goodwin does not answer him. She keeps asking who blew up the train. Stephen does not know anything. He thinks this is just a military simulation. Goodwin sees the situation and tells him, "In 8 minutes you will be back on the train." Just like before, Stephen only has 8 minutes. He has not had time to react. Then a flashback appears. He returns to the beginning of the breakthrough. Stephen wakes up again from the train. The woman in front of him still says the same thing. But there are some things that are different from before. After being spilled with coffee by a stranger, the gentle woman helps him clean the coffee on his shoes. Stephen sets an 8-minute timer on his watch. No matter if this is a simulation or not, he decides to complete his mission first. With his military instinct, he assesses that the train exploded from the back. He goes to the back toilet to look for clues. After some attempts, he finds a bomb in the ventilation duct. There is a cell phone attached to the bomb wire. It turns out that the villain uses a remote way to detonate the bomb. The next problem arises. Stephen is a pilot. He can't defuse the bomb. He asks the air how to defuse the bomb. It turns out that Goodwin couldn't hear his conversation earlier. Clearly they are not in the same time. In desperation, Stephen pretends to do a security check and tells the passengers to turn off their electronic devices, hoping to find the culprit. The rich kid with glasses doesn't want to cooperate. Stephen slaps him twice. The other passengers quickly put down their phones. And the next second, the explosion happens on time. Stephen returns to the mysterious room. After dying twice in agony, Stephen wants to know what really happened. Goodwin asks permission from her boss and tells him part of the truth. At 7:48 a.m., a train heading to Chicago exploded, and all the passengers inside died. This terrorist attack is just the beginning. There are more chain explosions to come. Stephen's task is to find the perpetrator. Up to this point, he is more confused, because the train has already exploded. How can he go back to the train? Why did he turn into Sean? Goodwin doesn't give an explanation. She tells him to continue his mission. Then a beam of light strikes. Stephen goes back to the train again, as if time went backwards. But every time he goes back to the train, the situation will change slightly. One of the details is the clock. Stephen starts to reset his 8-minute timer. After 3 cycles of torture, he is adept at avoiding the spilled coffee. The man with glasses who came out of the toilet caught Stephen's attention. When he wanted to follow him, the woman on the train made him feel sorry. Stephen took the woman away before the explosion came. He followed the man with glasses who wanted to take his phone. The man with glasses must have thought he was crazy. They both argued and fought. And then, the train that was not far away exploded. Clearly, the man with glasses was not the killer. As Stephen was stunned, the man with glasses kicked him to the rail. The train that came immediately took his life. Then Stephen came back to the mysterious room again. This time Stephen was very excited, because he at least knew the location of the bomb. Maybe they don't need to look for the bomber, just tell all the passengers to get off the train. But the boss in the video told him that the explosion was a fact that could not be changed. The people on the train are just source code. He just needs to find out who the killer is. He doesn't need to save the people in the source code world. Next is the most confusing part. Steven began to wonder, what is source code? The boss told him that source code is a complex quantum calculation method. As a simple example, the light will produce a short afterglow effect when turned off. The brain will also have electromagnetic waves for 8 minutes after death. The short 8 minutes can be stored with technology. It turns out that Steven and Sean's genes are very compatible, so they use Steven's brain to take the wave. After 8 minutes, the world will disappear, but they can find the killer with source code, and they can prevent the attacks that will happen in the real world. According to intelligence, the villain will blow up the entire city of Chicago next, because time is urgent. They immediately sent Steven back to the train, knowing that this mission is very important. This time he became very calm. According to Goodwin's instructions, there is a hidden gun in the second-floor room of the train. If there is an emergency, he can use it. Steven found the gun, but unfortunately the security officer saw the scene. Steven was considered a criminal. Seeing that the 8 minutes were running out, Steven knew that this mission might fail again. He asked the woman next to him, "If you had 1 minute left in your life, what would you do?" They hadn't finished talking. A loud explosion came. Everyone turned to ashes in an instant. This time Goodwin didn't rush to ask who the killer was. He comforted Steven instead. No one could stand the torture of death, maybe out of pity. Goodwin deliberately showed the military emblem next to her. Steven saw it and remembered it right away. Then he returned to the world of source code. He had never seen the military emblem before. He asked the woman to help him find his identity. Not Sean, but Steven. Then he found a military doctor on the train. Steven immediately asked what the emblem meant. The doctor told him that it was a military base. When he wanted to contact the military base, the woman suddenly came from behind. She told Steven a shocking news. Steven, that he was told to look for, has been proven dead. Before he died, he still saved 2 of his comrades, and he also got a Medal of Honor from the military. Then many memories entered Steven's brain. The lost memories all came back. Then the woman in front of him began to blur. Steven returned to the mysterious room. He asked Goodwin if he was really dead. Goodwin this time told all the truth. It turned out that Steven had died in Afghanistan. Part of his brain was still alive. The body and room he saw were just his brain's imagination, so that he could complete his mission calmly. The boss promised to kill him after the mission was over, and they also reminded the lives of millions of Chicago residents. Steven kept going back and forth. He didn't know how many times he died from the explosion. He still hadn't found the killer. Steven's psychological defense began to collapse. He couldn't stand the torture anymore. The boss played Steven's father's voice. It was his father's condolence speech after he fell. Hearing his father's voice, Steven was full of enthusiasm. This time he managed to get a gun. Then he gathered the courage to unplug the phone in the bomb. Luckily, the bomb didn't explode. He found the last call record on the phone. Whoever's phone rang on the train, he was the killer. No mistake. The bomber took out his phone. Steven immediately chased him. He followed the bomber all the way. He saw him enter a carriage. He seemed to throw something and hurried away. Steven didn't catch him right away. He entered the carriage to see the situation. He found a wallet thrown on the floor. He understood everything right away. And then, the train left. Steven saw the speeding train had no way out. He endured the pain and jumped. He couldn't just give up on the man in front of him. It turned out that the bomber deliberately threw his wallet into the carriage. The purpose was to make people think he died in the explosion. He saw various bombs placed in front of him. The bomber admitted that this was his style, and at the critical moment, the woman suddenly followed Steven. When Steven was shocked, he was shot twice. The woman who wanted to escape was also killed immediately. Before he died, he remembered the license plate number, and he also knew the identity of the bomber. After returning to the real world, Steven told all the clues to the military. The killer in the real world was also quickly arrested. Steven still wanted to save the train. He begged Goodwin to run the source code program. When the 8 minutes were up, turn off his life system. But he knew that this couldn't be changed. He wanted to stop the picture at the beautiful moment. Goodwin was very hesitant, because she knew the boss wouldn't let Steven. They still wanted to use him for some experiments. Goodwin then felt sorry and decided to help Steven once. He successfully returned to the source code world. This time he immediately caught the killer. Then he called the police. He revealed the entire plan of the bomber. Then he returned to the carriage. He paid the comedy star to make all the passengers laugh. This was the beautiful picture that Steven said. Finally, the 8 minutes arrived. All the passengers froze at that moment. In the real world, Goodwin also kept her promise and ended his life. It turned out that Steven's body was only left with his brain. His brain had been fitted with various electronic devices. And what they didn't expect was that the source code world didn't really end. After 8 minutes, the world was still alive. Because Steven, every time he returned to the train, there were some small changes. This also indicates that the source code world, every mission will produce a parallel universe. Steven finally succeeded with perseverance. He saved the train and the woman in that world. Finally, they lived happily, and the movie ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.